Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Buffs. My name is Mario Vitanzi. With me, as always, is the incomparable Zach Seegers. And for the first time in the history of doing this show, Zach, I am not the best-looking guy on the screen. Please welcome the legendary Jake Butt, former Broncos and Michigan tight end. Jake, thank you so much for joining us, dude. We so appreciate your time. And my God, are you good-looking?
How's the biceps? Because the truth is, at the end of the day, it comes down to that's what I'm saying. So we could argue about a lot of things, but no one can argue about bicep size here. That you got that one.
Listen, man, you say that and you flatter me, but I know for a fact that you wore a hoodie, because if you wore a schmedium like me, then you would put me to shame. So I do appreciate your grace since you were kind enough to come onto our show. So that's a class act all the way, Jake Butt. He's over there.
All I'm going to say is that's a good-looking shirt, so maybe I do need a schmedium or a large or an XL, whatever. I think I need one of those shirts. I'm a Buff fan now.
My man, that's what I like to hear, and that's why we had you on the show. So before we get started, Jake, I want to give you the floor. I want you to plug whatever you want to plug. Talk about your story if you want to, kind of where you came from. Anybody that doesn't know, you were a Michigan tight end drafted by the Broncos. Anything that you want to share, man, the floor is yours. Like, just go nuts with it.
Only thing I would want to share is I'm now in the sports media space after getting injured, a good amount through my playing career. And there was a period where I was getting injured and I was like, man, hey, like if I can pull myself out and like reinvent myself, then that'll be a great thing. And I'm going to try to like give back if that's the case. So this year I actually had the opportunity and I started a fundraiser called The Game Gives Back. And it was centered around rivalries, Ohio State versus Michigan. In about 8 days, we raised $90,000, and that went back to feed communities. So I will say this to just please keep an eye on that, because we're going to do it again next year. And as a principle, all it is taking rivals that hate each other and want to compete with each other, the Broncos and the Chiefs, the Broncos and the Raiders. You could go across whatever. We're going to try to expand this thing to try to raise money. So out of everything else, out of anything I could say, that's what I'll say is let's just stay in tune. I think it was a really powerful movement. So thanks for giving me the floor there.
I love that, man. And I love that you're doing that. That's awesome. And when you do that next year, pass along that information to me and to Zach, and we'll pump it as much as we can. Obviously the show is called Let's Talk Buffs, but this episode we're going to name Let's Talk Butt, because we want to know what Jay Booty has to say. We're going to talk Buffs a little bit, but one of the reasons we had you on, Jake, obviously your Michigan Wolverines are in the college football playoff once again. And not only that, the number 1 seed, but we will get into that. I just wanted to preview it a little bit. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing from CU. So obviously as a former player, a guy that played under Harbaugh, seems like a little bit different from Deion. So talk a little bit based on your experiences, like maybe some differences between Coach Prime and Harbaugh, maybe some things that you like that Deion's doing, some things that maybe rub you the wrong way. Talk about that.
Well, it's just completely different where those programs are at. I think of Deion as somebody that's playing the game the way it needs to be played and utilizing social media and branding, which is the world we're at in college football. It's NIL. Colorado, I don't think they've had as many headlines as what they've had in this year alone, maybe in the past decade. You looked at, early on, they were doing historic numbers in terms of viewership watching their games. Like that's the Deion effect. That's value to the program and to the university and to the football team. So he's doing that the right way. Coach Harbaugh is completely different because he's aligned with Michigan. Michigan already is the brand. So they're going to go out and get the proven head coach. I say that because they're completely different places. When Deion came to Colorado, they didn't need they needed a few things, right? It was going to be harder to win at Colorado than it would be to win at Michigan. And the path to winning at Colorado looks completely different than the path to winning at Michigan. How do you sell to a recruit to come play at Colorado? Well, you have to do what Deion's doing. And you look at what they've done in the transfer portal. You look at the roster turnover last year. I understand it rubs people the wrong way. I understand a lot of people don't understand it. But I can tell you this as a guy that kind of lived in my recruiting through the beginning of social media and watching it now, This is the game that has to be played. Like the winners of tomorrow invest in social media today, because that's how the kids communicate. That's how the future of your team communicates and learns about your program. So Deion's playing the game the right way. I just thought it was hilarious. You had some people that said, Deion, man, like that it did. You weren't even that good this year. Like, do you guys, for those that say that, do you realize where the program was? Like a good coach, I work for the Big Ten Network and I covered the Northwestern football team, who all of a sudden has a chance to do something historic and win a bowl game against a Utah team and get to 8 wins, which is unbelievable, all things considered.
Crazy.
He doesn't have as many wins as Michigan or Ohio State, but he beat expectations more than anybody.
Right.
Deion in Colorado, like a good coach beats expectations. A good coach isn't the guy that wins the most games. A good coach is someone that beats expectations. Deion completely exceeded that.
Yeah. It was an incredibly dark time. I think the darkest time, at least that I've been alive in the program's history. And he seems to immediately have rebounded it or I don't know, turned it around. I'm curious though, Jake, from your perspective, because like you said, you're working for the Big Ten Network, you're seeing this up close yourself. Do you think the way he's building this program has a high ceiling? I think the floor is high because you're bringing in all these transfer portal guys, and they're more proven than high school kids. They're more experienced. They can contribute sooner. So I feel like maybe the floor is there, but I wonder do you think the national champion can ever be a transfer fed team, or do you think you still need some blue blood recruiting? Because I feel Deion is still, I think it's good, a lot better than CU would be doing without him on the freshman recruiting trail, but they're fairly pedestrian on that front, while they're seemingly pouring most of their assets into the transfer portal guys. First transfer portal class last year, second this year. What do you think the limits of that are, or do you think there are any?
I'm going to ask you a question about that too, because as it applies to the ceiling, I would say that's subjective. What is your ceiling for Colorado? Like, are you in your heart, do you want to see them win a national title? Because I would say, I don't know that that's Colorado's ceiling right now. I think there's ceilings they need to break through before that conversation really starts. But I do think that's the advantage of today's college football. Look at USC and Lincoln Riley, just to give you a great example. That USC team was that we weren't talking about USC. We weren't talking about USC before Lincoln Riley got there. They were average at best many times. And Lincoln Riley comes in and turns over that roster completely. And all of a sudden you have a Heisman candidate and they just missed the playoffs, not this past season, but the year before. That's the value of the transfer portal. Every coach that I talk to, though, looks at the transfer portal slightly different. And the great coaches understand this. Recruiting has to be the lifeblood of your organization. And then you use the transfer portal strategically when you know you can compete for big time goals. Michigan did it. Ohio State did it. There's a lot of teams that have done it. You have to recruit organically because that's your culture. Like football culture matters so much. You have to build a culture year over year. And then you can plug and play with strategically with transfers. You cannot go in there and say 80% of your starters are transfers and expect to compete at the highest level. But you do need to use it. Like it's somewhere in between. There's some little equation that'll work out, and it's different for every team. I'd have to say.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think at some point, like that's the building block, right? Like where CU has been at, like where they were last year, kind of where they're coming off of this season. You're going to have to hit the transfer portal really hard because you just straight up do not have the talent. And like, let's say that you have a couple excellent recruiting classes, you're not really going to see that for a few years, like for at least 1 or 2 years. And so in order to build that foundation and become, a bowl eligible team, then yeah, you got to hit the transfer portal hard. And then maybe that in turn will lead to better recruiting on the long end. And speaking of recruiting, and I got to know this, and if you don't want to answer, Jake, I understand, but let's say hypothetically, you're a high school senior right now. You're exactly you, like everything that you went through as a high school senior, one of the most highly recruited tight ends in the country. And you have Coach Harbaugh knocking on your door, and you have Coach Prime knocking on your door, and they are both pursuing you heavily, okay? at this juncture in time right now, who are you going to play for?
Here's what I'll say is like, I would probably never really even consider Colorado if this was the conversation, just because I grew up in Ohio. Like I wanted to play in that rivalry.
Yeah.
And historically Michigan develops tight ends better than Colorado, just long-term average. But I just know for a fact, if Deion Sanders sits down in front of you, you can kind of feel the gravity of him, right? Like I just imagine if Deion Sanders calls you, you answer. If Deion Sanders wants to have a conversation with you, you answer. So I'd at least have a conversation with him. But I think my heart was set on, I'm happy with Michigan.
Who else, out of curiosity, who else recruited you real quick? Sorry, Zach.
Like it was really a lot of Big Ten schools like Wisconsin, Northwestern, like Stanford, Tennessee. But a lot of the schools that kind of fit the Michigan mold were like my main schools that I was considering. UCLA, stuff like that.
Cool. Go ahead, Zach.
Cool. Sorry, I totally lost my train of thought. Also comparing Coach Prime and Coach Harbaugh. I'm curious because Coach Harbaugh, at least from the outside looking in, you would know a lot better than us, but he seems like a fairly demanding guy, maybe a little more old school, to use like the Primeism. Where do you think that can go too far? Because I feel like that's one area where maybe Prime has faced, or not even maybe, I think it is where he's faced the most criticism from the outside. The way he came into Colorado, turned over the roster, kind of forced some kids out. I think there's the whole interview on Jason Whitlock like a month ago or whatever that we talked about on here from players that weren't even on the program come part of the program come August, talking about kind of being shunned by Prime or whatever. Where do you think, I don't know, how much of that do you think is okay? How much of it do you think can become problematic? I'm curious.
Yeah, it really all comes back to winning, to be honest with you. Like your tolerance for that is directly correlated to the results on the field and like your improvement as a player. Like, hard work for the sake of hard work, guys are going to get tired of that. Like if I was trying to be a great guitar player, but my guitar teacher wanted me to do sled pushes for the next 8 hours in the name of hard work, I'd be pissed off because I'm like not getting better at it, right? Some coaches just say, hey, we're going to do hard work for the sake of hard work. And at the end of the day, you can't really say, well, how are we better as a team? How am I better as an individual? How are we better as a unit? That's where disconnect starts to happen. So, what happens is there's coaches that are old school and they want to just work hard, but the plan and the structure doesn't lead to literal measurable results. That's when you start to lose your team and be like, dude, screw this. Like, what are we doing? This makes no sense. I actually think most guys enjoy hard work if they win. Like, I remember when Harbaugh came in there, like we were 5-7 the year before with Brady Hoke. Man, we were comfortable with Coach Hoke and we worked hard. Things were, but we were losing. And then in comes Coach Harbaugh and like he literally had us practicing for 4 hours. Like the maximum amount of time you were allowed to be on the field was for 4 hours. We were on the field for 4 hours and we were literally like, this is crazy. But yet we knew if we just listened, we would win. So the only guys that complained were the guys that we knew you can transfer to the next school. And that was all good. It was better for them and it was better for us. We embraced that hard work because we knew it would lead to victories, which inevitably it did.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up too, Jake, because things are going to come out. And because Deion is such an enigmatic figure, people are going to find reasons to dislike him. There's just like when any individual gets that much attention, no matter how great they might be, no matter how much of a beacon of positivity they might be, people are going to poke holes in them. What it comes down to is the season before Deion was hired, CU was 1-11. They were lucky to win the one game, and the games that they lost, none of them were close. None of them were competitive. So obviously when Deion comes in and he has the famous speech about he's bringing his luggage and it's Louis, and now you got all of these kids that are coming out, and it feels a little bit like sour grapes. And something that, Zach and I talk about a lot on the show is I don't like to criticize these college athletes because at the end of the day, like they're kids, right? They're in their early 20s and maybe they don't know any better. But for these kids to come out and give you a peek behind the curtain of like how Deion really was, and it's like, yeah, that's one side of the coin. On the other, college football is now a business. Deion Sanders was given a lot of money to turn around arguably the worst D1 program in all of football. And if he's going to hurt some feelings along the way, they should have been a better team. I mean, it's like Deion is not worried about hurt feelings. And it sucks to say, like, he's not a perfect person. You know, he's not going to please everybody. But you're right, Jake. As long as they get to the point where they're winning football games, and yeah, they didn't win as many as maybe people wanted them to or they even expected. But this was a much, much, much better team than it was the year before. And so now the process is all continuing to improve. And yeah, like stories like that are going to come out. But the program was in shambles and something had to be done. And he's getting paid to fix it. And part of fixing it is getting rid of the pieces that could not help him win football games.
What business are we in? Like, I didn't sign up for football because I felt like it was going to be sunshine and roses and I was going to feel good every day. I signed up for football for the potential to feel the joy of victory, understanding that meant I was going to feel some severe pain individually and as a team. Like, if you are in the business of trying to feel good, you don't play football. If you're in the business of understanding, this might feel like hell at times, but boy, does the few moments when you win feel great. Great. Like Deion laid it out clearly. I honestly, I think that was a brilliant thing. And Deion, when you're as bad as Colorado was, that's the exact thing you have to say. Because if that makes you uncomfortable, fine, leave. And then the guys that want to fight to stay, great. Yes. I can win with you. But you suddenly get a little bit of clarity by presenting that challenge to people. If you're worried about how they feel, you'll keep losing. No one wants that, do they? It's tough to lose, man. It's a long season already. It's tough to lose. I would prefer to feel horrible every day and win on the weekends than to feel great every day and lose on the weekends. You know, it just, of course, that makes sense.
I love it.
Absolutely. I'm curious. The Buffs are looking to kind of turn over their tight end position, and I figure, like, who better than you to ask? What do you look for in a tight end? If you are the Buffs tight end coach, you know, they call you out of the Big Ten booth. They give you an absurd amount of money. You can't turn it down. You're their tight end coach. What are you?
Let's manifest that. I want to see that.
What are you like? What is your shopping list of traits? What do you want to see in your ideal Division I, Big 12, I guess, in this case, tight end?
I mean, it depends. I do think it depends. Like, I do think there's a few different ways to play tight end. Like, I look at like Gronk and I look at Kelsey and I look at those as two all-time great tight ends, but I think they're completely different tight ends. You know, Gronk was more by sheer force. Like, man, he was going to catch a stick route, break 10 tackles and score a touchdown. He was going to be a bruiser blocker. Kelsey, if you notice, like, he's an effective blocker, but he's not a bruiser. It's just the way they scheme him. But boy, does every route look the same, and he's such a fluid route runner. So as far as it comes for Colorado, like, it depends on what kind of system you want to run. And I think with like Shedeur, it seems like they want to be more up tempo and they want to throw the ball. Like, they'd be looking more for a Kelsey type, which to me, you're probably looking for a guy that played receiver in high school that ends up being just like a bigger receiver that you can match up against tight ends and safeties. And you can teach him to be at least an effective blocker. I don't need you to be a bruising blocker, but an effective blocker. I think that could fit within the Colorado system. So, you know, the best thing you could do for a tight end, did they play basketball? You know, Antonio Gates, Tony Gonzalez, you could go down the list. A good basketball player that knows how to get rebounds and knows how to move on the court, that translates to being a good tight end. Did they play soccer? Did they play track? Other sports? Because you're looking at a guy that's going to be 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". I want to see him play other sports so I know he's got real fluid hips, good feet, and kind of get in and out of his breaks. Of course, the film will say, hey, can he catch the ball as well? So all those things I think help translate to a good tight end.
What was your other sport, Jake?
Soccer and basketball. I actually played soccer and basketball my whole life, and I'm convinced I was skinny coming into a college because of it. But I know for a fact, like, I was a great rebounder because I understood like body position. I understood leverage. I knew how to like shield a guy off and like go get a rebound, which is the same as shielding a guy off to go get a catch. So I know in soccer is the same thing, like short area quickness and like foot placement, knee angles, like that's separation on routes. So like I know that I was a better tight end because of those sports.
Love it.
And then I'm also curious, just this isn't as much of a college question, but it's kind of become, I don't know, a cliche, I guess, in the NFL. We're seeing Sam Laporta break it this year, and it's part of the reason what Sam Laporta is doing is so impressive. But tight ends always struggle early in their career because it's such a big adjustment from the college game, and it's highlighted how, well, they're having to learn how to be a blocker and a receiver at the same time. But I've always kind of wondered, I guess, why is the curve so great? Because they're having to play the same position in college. Yes, the asks are somewhat different, but I'm curious, as someone that's made that leap yourself, why is it so difficult at tight end compared to most NFL positions to make that leap?
You know, Zach, I actually think it's the mental side of it more than anything. And I think that's why Laporta looks so good, where, most colleges, as we just talked about with Colorado or whoever you want to name it, like most colleges are lean more towards spread, and the tight end's like a hybrid between a off-ball tight end and a receiver. And you don't have to make a lot of reads. You don't have to learn a complex playbook. Once you get to the NFL, you have to know the why, you have to know the F, especially if you're drafted high. They want to move you around. You have to know pass protection. You have to know receivers because they want to move you into the slot. You have to know a full playbook. Why Laporta is succeeding right now is you can go back and look at his film from Iowa last year. That dude lined up on the ball, off tackle, in the slot, solo receiver backside, number one outside to trips. He lined up as a fullback. He lined up as a running back. He played special teams. He lined up everywhere. So he just knew what an NFL system was, and he knew how to succeed in each one of those roles. A lot of guys are just like pure raw, like great athletes, but they can't conceptualize like their role within an NFL playbook. You also have like, hey, a post route in college is just a post route. It's 10 to 15 yards and break at a 45-degree angle. In the NFL, a post route in the playbook could look three different ways. It could be a seam versus two high. It could be a deep crosser versus one high. Versus quarters, it could turn into a dig. And that's kind of what I'm hinting at here is like a guy that's a freak athlete. Sure, that sounds great. But the quarterback, if he expects you to run a dig route versus quarters, you have to know it's quarters and you have to run the dig route. You have to be in the right place at the right time. I think a lot of guys struggle, and they suddenly start to play slow because they're thinking so much about their assignment. The guys that succeed early on grasp the playbook, period. It's the same for quarterbacks too, really. You would be surprised how many quarterbacks get in the huddle that are drafted high and cannot call a play. The play is coming into their headset and they don't even know what the words are. It's hard. It's hard. It's a lot. But that is the number one reason why guys cannot pick up faster and succeed sooner.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that,
Yeah,
man. Zach, you got anything else?
Well, I'm ready to talk some national championship if you are.
Absolutely. Let's do it. Segues are weird, so we're just going to get right into it. Jake, the question on everybody's mind right now, especially Michigan fans, is why Bama over Florida State? Why did it have to be Bama? Like as a Michigan alum, and I assume still a Michigan fan, were you just a little bit disappointed that it ended up being Alabama over Florida State? Because if we're being frank, cards on the table, like Florida State has a great defense. I get it. I know they have several guys that are going to play on Sunday. And maybe you're going to give me a PC answer, and that's okay because you're in the media and everything. But that's an easier matchup, right? And Florida State still technically deserved to be in there. So as a Michigan guy, were you a little bit disappointed that now you got to go up against an Alabama as opposed to a Florida State?
Actually, I wasn't disappointed because for every reason you just said, though. I definitely know some people were like that. I feel Michigan's been the best team in college football all year. So like, to me, it's like, who cares who you play? Like you all year, you guys have said you're the best team in college football. I agree. So who cares who it is? Why I was disappointed is, and why I've been disappointed this whole time with the committee is how dangerous. Imagine if that's how we selected the NFL playoffs, where we just took an outside group of people and said, hey, who do you guys think is the most deserving or the best teams, right? Like, no, all the time we find out that who we think the best team is, especially in football, loses. Like, that's not a good measure for how we should decide who gets to compete for a national title. Like they said, oh yeah, like the committee has to pick the best 4. I said, since when? We didn't hear that last year. If it was the best 4, Georgia should have been in. They're one of the best 4 teams in college football. They lost to a great team in Alabama. They're one of the best 4. Ohio State was the number 1 team for a good portion of the playoff rankings.
Right.
And we all said, we don't think they're the number 1 team, but they're the most deserving. So for half the season, we said they have the best resume and they're the most deserving. And then all of a sudden we said it's the best 4. And everyone just said, of course it's the best 4. I'm like, since when? That's my issue with it. I'm going to the Rose Bowl. I've never been. This is going to be a phenomenal matchup. I can't wait to watch. So, and you know what? Like for everything that's happened with Michigan, you should sit here and say, I want whatever path is laid ahead of me, because I want to prove regardless that we're the best team. You don't want to win and have there be any asterisk. If you can beat Alabama and then beat the winner of Washington, Texas, who can say anything to you? Like this is exactly what needed to happen, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's funny you said that real quick, Jake, because Zach and I had this conversation. You know, obviously it's a Buff show, but we need to talk college football. And so we did a show right after they announced it. And Zach and I kind of agreed. And you're right. Like we had literally discussed that it does set a dangerous precedent. And where does it end? Because I said exactly what you said. I was like, if you're really looking for the 4 best teams, like Georgia is absolutely one of the 4 best teams in the country. Ohio State is absolutely one of the 4 best teams in the country. And thank God that we're going to 12 teams. I think it's a little much, but I guess, you know, you don't get in 12 teams, you don't get to complain. No bitching, nothing like that. So, like, now they have, like, they're really covering their ass here. But Zach and I echoed your sentiments exactly. It's like, yeah, do you base it off of who won what? Because if it's based on that, then yeah, Florida State gets in. But if you're basing it off of who are the best teams, then it's probably Michigan, UW, Georgia, and Ohio State, if we're being perfectly honest.
And now it's fixed. You're getting the expanded playoff next year with automatic buys. I mean, there is the problem still where the committee will be involved with ranking the at-large, but
now people are going to complain about who gets a first-round bye, but at least they'll be in the playoff. At least everyone will get to play now.
Exactly. Everyone will have a chance to prove themselves. Florida State would have gotten a chance to prove. Like, I don't think they're one of the 4 best teams, but they would have gotten a chance to prove everyone wrong. No one thought Ohio State was going to do what they did the very first year of the playoff. And I think doing what they did immediately validated the playoff and showed we deserve to give 4 teams a shot because the 4 seed just won it in the very first year. So I don't know. I think generally it'll be positive. But I'm curious, Jake. I know you work for the Big Ten Network and you have to be somewhat impartial, but imagine part of you, like in your heart of hearts, still is with Michigan for this game, for this national championship run. What's keeping you up about this Alabama matchup? Because it feels like this could be the year. I agree with what you said. Michigan's been the best team in college football all season long. What's worrying you in this massive spot?
I mean, the first thing would be that Nick Saban is a guy, like, he's real comfortable in these type of scenarios. In Michigan, their last was my junior year in 2015. The lights have looked bright in these situations for Michigan at the playoff level. So that's number one. The second one is it has to be Milroe, their quarterback, and just his playmaking ability. I mean, that dude's done some unbelievable things. And when I talk to defensive coordinators, the number one thing that concerns them and keeps them up at night is a quarterback that is able to run the football, aka Jalen Milroe. So that's the second piece of it. The third piece is like, I think, what happens is Michigan can dominate teams and out physical lesser teams by running the football. And I get it. Auburn ran for over 200 yards of them, and Alabama's defenses look shaky at times. I expect Alabama's defense to play their best game, and I think it's going to be hard to run the football for Michigan. So can they run it enough? Can they play enough complementary offensive football to get it done? They truly need all hands on deck. They need all 11 guys across all 3 units to play their best game. I think if they can do that, they got a good shot. But obviously, that's a really tough task.
I'm honestly looking forward to this coaching matchup over everything. I mean, Saban versus Harbaugh seems like a match made in heaven. And I think this might be the best storyline out of all of them going into the playoff. So obviously they have to hit on 3 phases. I'm sure you know about Michigan football a little bit more intimately than we do, Jake. I mean, you know about your Blake Corums and your JJ McCarthy's. You know that the defense is, I mean, again, stacked with guys that are going to be playing on Sundays. The defense, I think, if I remember correctly, second in the nation in points against per game. It's actually less than 10 points per game they're giving up, which is just, I mean, first off, it's absurd that it's less than 10. And it's also insane that they're somehow not the top ranked defense in the land. But give us a couple players that maybe we should have some eyes out for when that game comes up. Like maybe not the run of the mill guys.
That's probably more. That probably has more to do with the offensive play in the Big Ten this year, man. It was not. It was stinky, man. It was not.
That's fair.
It was not great. So it's skewed a little bit in that sense. Just watch the interior of Michigan's defensive line: Kenneth Grant, Chris Jenkins, Mason Graham. Those guys, like interior defensive linemen, don't get a lot of love. Those dudes are beasts. I mean, those 3 dudes might be day 1, day 2 picks. From a floor to a ceiling. And then another one is Mikey Sainristil, who's their nickel corner. Just as a guy that is in the right place at the right time. Almost like a Justin Simmons type guy where like you can almost he's so good at his job and he makes it look so easy that it's almost a little bit deceiving. Like he just always makes the play. Mikey
people think that they make bad throws and they're just throwing the ball right at him. That's how good he is what you're saying.
Yes. And like, he won't have like, he's had some big hits, but for the most part, it's just like really great form tackling in the right place at the right time. Like, and they blitz him, Mikey he's their nickel off the edge. They'll blitz him a bunch too. And I think if you want to stop Milroe from running the football, you need to include Mikey as like kind of like a spy and use him in some more unique roles. So he's a guy, he's number 0, the nickel for Michigan. I think he's got a shot to have a big game.
Gotta love the number 0. I feel like that has to be reserved for a good player, in my opinion.
You can't be a scrub wearing 0. Absolutely not.
Absolutely. I'm curious about the other game a little bit. I know your attention's definitely on the Rose Bowl matchup. But what do you think about, the last Pac-12 game ever, potentially? Quinn Ewers, Michael Penix. I mean, that matchup seems incredible. Do you have a lean in that game right now in terms of pick, and what are you looking forward to in that matchup?
This is why I'm saying like this 4-team playoff, like you can say what you want. We could certainly argue about Florida State, but what cannot be denied is like, this is probably the best like collection of teams we've had since the 4-team playoff started. I mean, if you could tell me any team wins in any matchup, then I would not be surprised if anything happens because of how good teams are this year. The funny thing is, starting next year, this is basically a Big Ten versus the SEC. Like this is Big Ten versus SEC, right? Like that's where we're at. So, what I'm excited for in that matchup, and you lead it, is 2 great quarterbacks and 2 great football teams. I look at Washington and it's like, I even thought when they went through that gauntlet of their schedule going through the Pac-12, I'm like, man, they got to drop one of these, right? Like they got to drop at least one. They were Oregon was a 10-point favorite in the Pac-12 championship. Washington,
the disrespect was real. Yeah.
I am done doubting them, but at the same time, I really love Texas. I mean, to go into Tuscaloosa earlier in the season, we're talking about Alabama and handle. I mean, they handled business in there. For them to handle business the way they did in the Big 12 championship game, they got weapons all over the field offensively. Is Texas back? Man, this team, it's been the talk of college football kind of in the offseason. This roster is ready to win now. That's another phenomenal matchup. So I really don't know which way I could lean in that game. I would not be surprised either way with either team winning. I cannot wait to watch.
Have you
Well,
watched
on
the
that note, Jake, we're going to go ahead and get your prediction for what you think is going to happen in these games. I know you don't know which way to lean, but you're in the business and they're going to ask you anyway. So here we go. First game up, Michigan versus Alabama. Who do you got?
That one, here's what I will say. I'm more confident that Michigan-Bama will be a lower scoring game, defensive battle. I got Michigan winning a close one. Like, I think special teams could play a factor. I think special teams will play a factor. I think Michigan's defense is actually going to do a damn good job against Jalen Milroe. I got Michigan winning like 21-17 or like 20-15. I think it'll be a close one.
Zach, what about you?
I'm going Michigan too. I don't know. I think Alabama's been a little shaky this year. I think Texas has been a little shaky this year too, although they're incredibly talented. I'll go with you low scoring. I'll say Michigan 20, Alabama 13.
Yeah, I don't want it to get lost in the fact that Alabama had to convert a 4th and 31 against Auburn. And really the only reason that they did it is because their starting corner, who would have been guarding the player on that play, was knocked out like two plays before. Now, that's not an excuse. The dude still has to make a play. But for some reason, that's something that not a lot of people are talking about. They had all of the momentum. And then the other thing that no one is talking about with their matchup with Georgia, they're going up against a Brock Bowers who was maybe 70% for that game, and they still almost won. And their entire offense kind of goes as Brock Bowers goes. Lade McConkey as well was not 100%. And you could tell by the way that those dudes were moving, that was not the typical Georgia offense. And so Alabama won the SEC, give them their flowers. They got in. I just don't see them as the regular Alabama threat that they have become known as, right? I'm just not sold. I think they kind of backed their way into the college football playoff. And Jake, you think it's going to be a close game? I think Michigan's going to beat up on them. I think that this is going to be like a 2, maybe 3 possession win for Michigan. And I know, like you're mentioning Milroe, he's an incredible athlete. He is an average thrower of the football. He is a really, really good college quarterback. But is that going to translate? Is that going to translate to the next level? Every other quarterback in the college football playoff, that's an NFL-style quarterback. That's a dude that's going to be playing on Sundays. Milroe, maybe his game will develop more. But at this point right now, that's the biggest disparity that I see between these 4 teams. That's the biggest drop-off is the quarterback position. So, shoot, I would take Michigan something like 27-13.
I hope. That'd be nice. That'd be nice.
I don't believe in Bama. And you know what? I'm so sick of them, dude. I can't see Alabama win another one. For God's sakes, anybody but them.
I think I got PTSD from the TCU game last year where I was like, all right, this one's over before it started. So I got to see it now. I got to see Michigan put it together.
I get it. And you're a little bit jaded, and that's okay. But I'll be your trumpet player, so to speak. All right, a game that you have a little bit less invested in. UW versus Texas. Who do you got? So we're Michigan across the board. That's good.
Okay, you're right. Texas has looked like there's been a really good Texas that beats Bama on the road, and then there's a Texas that's looked a little shaky. They lost to Oklahoma, right? I will say, I just think that it feels the year for Texas. I do feel their roster top to bottom, like even going back to the offseason. Former coach Urban Meyer loved their roster. There's a lot of people that talked about their roster, and it's shined through. I do think that this is the year for Texas to get it done, though. I love Washington's weapons. I love Michael Penix. I love some of their receivers. I think their defense is shaky at times, and Texas is able to take advantage of that. Texas's offense can take advantage of Washington's defense. Though Washington's offense is good, I like Texas's defense. So I do think that's going to be the key in this game, and I got Texas.
Zach?
The way you framed that there at the end gave me a little bit of pause because I kind of agree. I think Texas's offense against Washington's defense is a pretty scary matchup. But I'm going Washington. I don't know. Maybe it's some Pac-12 sentimentality and hoping they could do something. But I just think they're the Kingslayers this year. I think the Pac-12 was a legitimately loaded conference this season. And they have survived every shot they've taken so far. I think they are a very talented team. All three of those receivers are going to be drafted. Adunzie is going to be drafted pretty dang high. Penix would probably be drafted pretty high, if not for his age and the ACLs. I think they're a tough team. Like, I think Oregon's a really good team.
Yeah.
And they beat them twice. That's so hard to do. I feel it's more likely Texas does something, and maybe it's unfair to put their legacy of the last half decade on these college kids that weren't necessarily a part of those teams and this new coaching staff and everything. But I just don't trust Texas in big spots. I know what they did against Alabama this year, but I feel like they can come up short. Washington has been so consistent to me this season. I'm rolling with them.
I want to pick Washington too. And honestly, it gets back to what you said, Jake. Like, I kept trying to talk myself into, well, they're going to drop one of these. Like, they're going to lose to an Oregon. They're going to lose one of these Pac-12 games. Oh, they're going to lose the Pac-12 championship. It's just, I never bought them as an actual true blue contender for whatever reason. And yeah, I think I've had enough with doubting him, and a lot like Zach, and we've talked about it on the show. We both think that it would be hysterical if in the last real year of the Pac-12, as poorly as that conference has been handled from pillar to post, and now that it is completely faded away and they blew it out of the water and they completely ruined that conference, it would just be such karmic justice, and it would be absolutely hysterical if UW ended up winning the national championship. Now, I don't think that is what is going to happen, but I'm going to pick UW. And honestly, strictly for the fact, like, I'm a matchup guy. I love storylines. I love matchups. I can't wait to see Michigan, Alabama because of the head coaching storyline. I would love to see UW versus Michigan because you have the best passing offense in the entire NCAA versus arguably the best, overall defense in all of college football, and certainly one of the best pass defenses in all of college football. So it'll finally answer the age-old question, does defense win championships? Because you will have that Michigan D versus that UW O. So now that we have all of our finals, our individual finals picked, let's all go ahead and pick a national championship winner. I know it's presumptive, but that's what we do here. Jake, what do you got? Who's going to be your
where I'm riding. Yeah, you know where I'm going.
Yes, sir.
I seriously have looked at it and I said, this is the best team in college football all year.
They're
deep
are.
in every position. Coach Harbaugh is a phenomenal football coach. They have the JJ McCarthy. I think he has a chance to be the best quarterback in Michigan history. That's what's on the line here coming up. So I do think that they get it done.
Jake, listen, if I thought that Alabama was the best team, then I would have had Pat Surtain be on the show instead of you, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
This was all foreshadowing for what we think is going to happen.
That's right.
Yeah,
Zach, what do you got?
I fully agree. I think Michigan's the team. I think maybe if they could stumble against Alabama just because Alabama's Alabama and Nick Saban is Nick Saban. But I think they match up tremendously with Washington. I think they'd also match up pretty well with Texas. Again, I don't really trust Texas. If they meet Washington, though, in the national championship, that would give me memories of Oregon, Ohio State. And what was that, 2015, 2016?
Yeah.
Where it was just like, man, that Oregon team was awesome with Mariota. And it was just, this team's different. Yeah,
Yep.
it was just like, this team's different. This team's way more physical. This team is built different from Oregon. And I think kind of what Jake just said about Texas, Washington. Like, I think when Michigan's offense is going against Washington's defense, that's going to be a really ugly matchup for Washington's defense. Even if Washington's offense against Michigan's defense is maybe even and in a unbelievable matchup that I would love to watch, I think the other side of the ball would be too one-sided.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I again, like, I'm good with all these matchups. Like you said, Jake, or Zach, maybe it was you had said it. These four teams, there are no complaints. Or no, Jake, you had said it, where it's like you're not surprised by anything that could potentially happen. Like there's not really like an upset or nothing crazy that you think that would happen. Like conceivably, each one of these teams could win. But like I said, the matchup that I would most want to see in the Natty would be Michigan versus UW. It's the offense versus the defense. And Zach, I think you're absolutely right. If that happens, I think Michigan just punches them in the mouth. I think they out-physical them, and you're dead on. That is just different kind of big boy football up there in the north versus what UW is doing over in the Pac. So give me Michigan as the national champions of college football in 2023.
I'm scared that we're all picking. Like, I don't know that I feel better or worse that we're all picking Michigan, but I'll take it. I'll take it.
Jake, listen, everything that Zach and I have prognosticated this year has been true.
Except for our game pick.
What'd you have for the Buffs this year?
Well, I think we had 5 and 7, so pretty close.
Okay.
I think our week by week picks.
I think we had said that they would miss a bowl game, but they would look. I mean, we try not to make not to make the exact predictions because that's just fodder, right? Like nobody actually knows anything. It's like a blind squirrel finding a nut, but we give breadcrumbs, so to speak, right? Where it's like, it'll be greatly improved, but it'll be a stepping stone. And we had said when we very first started the show, when there was all this hype, we would tell people, like, try not to get too high. This, at the very, very best, could possibly be a bowl-eligible team, but they're not a team that's good enough yet to win more than 6 games. I mean, they started 3-0. The way that they were garnering national attention, having beaten TCU, who was in the national championship the previous year, there were really people that bit so hard on this that they believe, Jake, that this could be like a college football playoff team. And they just kind of fell victim to a little bit, and it's okay. And Zach and I tried to tell people, like, look, as long as you do better than you did the year before, and as long as you show growth, like, even though they only won a few more games than they did last year, how they looked as a team was completely different. And those were the kind of things that Zach and I predicted. We predicted that Shedeur Sanders would be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. We also said from week 1 that the offensive line would be their demise. And it absolutely was. And thankfully, Deion's out taking care of that. So, yeah, man, listen to our show. We get everything right. Like I said, it's going to be Michigan's going to win. Trust me.
Yeah, that makes me feel a lot better. That is that Colorado assessment is spot on. That's exciting. That is good news for Michigan. I'll pass the word on to Coach Harbaugh.
You let Coach Harbaugh know that Zach Seegers and Mario Vitanzi said he's going to be a national champion, but they're still not happy about it because he turned down the Denver Broncos job like a dick.
Hey, who knows? He hasn't signed the Michigan extension, so we'll see.
Well, I'm pretty sure we're not going to get rid of Sean Payton at this point.
We'll see. We'll see.
Jake, thank you, man, so much. You're the absolute best. You're one of my favorite guys of all time. Is there anything else you want to say before we get you out of here?
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you so much,
man. You're the best. And as always, Zach, what do we say?
Let's go Buffs.